Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into an incredibly fascinating, what I like to call inside-out journey. We're going to start by looking way down deep within ourselves to conquer our own subconscious. And then we'll slowly move outward. We'll decode social dynamics, master the subtle art of influence, and ultimately get a grip on the complex psychology of the world buzzing around us.
So let's start with a massive question. Why on earth do we sabotage our own success? I mean, we've all been there, right? You feel that quiet, creeping heaviness. You distract yourself. You completely avoid that necessary, difficult conversation with a partner. Or you leave that job application open on your browser for days, but you never actually click submit. We constantly abandon our own goals, and then, of course, we beat ourselves up for it. But what if I told you that this behavior isn't actually what you think it is?
Well, the brilliant Carl Jung actually hit the nail on the head here. He observed that your unconscious mind will literally do anything to cling to the familiar. See? Self-sabotage, it isn't laziness. It's not some fatal lack of discipline. It's actually a protective mechanism. Your subconscious mind is working overtime to protect you from change, because to your ancient biological wiring, change equals danger, period. So it creates this invisible, exhausting conflict between the part of you that desperately wants to grow and the part that just wants to stay safe.
Part 1. The mountain inside you. As author Brianna Wiest points out, the real obstacle blocking your life isn't the outside world. It's a psychological structure we build entirely from within.
When we look at Robert Greene's Law of Irrationality, it reveals something absolutely fascinating about how we're wired. Our brain is essentially this ancient machine, but with newer parts stocked right on top of it. We have the emotional limbic brain, which is incredibly fast and totally reactive. And then we have the logical neocortex, which is, well, a whole lot slower. So by the time your rational brain even starts weighing the options, your emotional brain has already hijacked the whole system. And that is exactly why we make irrational choices that keep us stuck. Because of this constant emotional hijacking, we end up forming what are known as unconscious commitments. A commitment to safety by avoiding risks, a commitment to control, which usually means blocking intimacy, a commitment to familiarity, just desperately clinging to the known. These are basically hidden emotional contracts we never actually meant to sign. We think it's just our personality, right? We say things like, oh, I'm just an overthinker, or I'm just not a confident person. But actually, scratch that. They are pure defense mechanisms, keeping us locked in a perpetual loop of self-sabotage.
Okay, so the absolute crucial point here is, how do we actually beat this? Well, if sudden, massive change triggers a biological panic in our nervous system, like a literal adjustment shock, we have to bypass it. We do this through micro-revolutions. You don't overhaul your entire life overnight. That never works. Instead, you just leave work 10 minutes earlier. You go for a walk for just 5 minutes a day. You save $5 before you ever try to save 500. Small, highly predictable steps build momentum. And that momentum is what safely builds an entirely new identity.
Part 2. Rewiring your inner dialogue. Once we've got a handle on those internal blocks, we absolutely have to look at the programming language running our minds, specifically the words we use and the information we let ourselves consume. And this brings us right to Don Miguel Ruiz's incredibly punchy framework. These 4 agreements are essentially a toolkit to protect your mindset. First up, be impeccable with your word, because your words literally cast spells, both on other people and on yourself. Second, don't take anything personally. What other people say, it's a reflection of their reality, definitely not yours. Third, don't make assumptions. Just ask the questions to find the actual truth. And fourth, always do your best. That keeps you taking action without sitting around expecting immediate rewards.
Let's actually zoom in on that first agreement for a second, especially when it comes to gossip. I want you to think of gossip as a literal computer virus. When someone shares malicious gossip with you, they are essentially inserting a tiny string of malicious code, emotional poison, right into your mind. And the more of these virus codes you consume, the more clogged your brain gets, until you literally can't think clearly anymore. Your outer world is just a reflection of your inner world, so you have to protect your inputs.
Part 3. The psychology of perception. Now that we've mapped out our inner dialogue, let's shift our gaze outward. Let's see how our internal wiring completely colors our external world, starting with Morgan Housel's Psychology of Money. 10x. 10 times. During the 1970s, the S&P 500 increased almost tenfold. So why does a random stat from the 70s matter to us right now? Well, if you were in your teens or 20s during that very specific decade, this massive, crazy growth deeply, permanently anchored your perception of the market. You see, your unique financial DNA is heavily shaped by the completely arbitrary economic environment of your youth. The 1970s generation generally walked away with a super positive view of the market and a much higher inclination to invest their cash. On the flip side, other generations, who maybe came of age during a brutal recession, might view that exact same stock market as absolutely terrifying. The major takeaway here: financial decisions aren't just calculated on a cold spreadsheet. They're driven by our highly arbitrary personal histories. Part 4. Decoding Human Nature. Building on that idea of personal history, let's turn the camera completely outward now to decode the group dynamics and the various masks people wear in society. The 14th century historian Ibn Khaldun observed something wild. History actually unfolds in highly predictable cycles. It goes like this. The first generation rebels and brings radical change. The second comes in and stabilizes that new world. The third focuses purely on practical, boring growth. And fourth generation, well, they feel the system is flawed, so they become totally apathetic, or they start preparing for a brand new revolution. It's generational myopia. We are all heavily controlled by the specific times we happen to be born into. To see the world clearly, we actually have to actively detach from the biases of our own era. Another massive part of human nature we have to decode is envy. Remember when Thomas Edison hired a brilliant young guy named Nikola Tesla? Edison promised him a massive financial reward if he could solve this huge problem. Well, Tesla actually succeeded. And Edison, he just laughed it off and flat out refused to pay. That wasn't just bad business on Edison's part. That was active, toxic envy. And people constantly hide this kind of envy behind masks. The leveler hides behind self-righteous criticism. The clinger attaches to you just to bask in your glow, while secretly hoping you crash and burn. Spotting these masks early is absolutely crucial to protecting yourself from the silent destruction of jealousy. Part 5. The Art of Influence. Okay, so we've observed how people operate and hide. Now, let's move to application and explore the actual clinical mechanics of social dynamics and seduction. Robert Greene outlines what is essentially a literal menu of human archetypes. You've got the charismatic, who draws you in with this unwavering, magnetic purpose. The dandy, who completely rejects traditional societal rules, offering this alluring sense of freedom we all secretly crave. Or the natural, who totally disarms you by just embodying this childlike spontaneity. Identifying these specific traits, both in yourself and in the people around you, is exactly how you navigate and ultimately master social influence. And that influence generally follows 4 very clinical phases. First, you awaken desire by pulling someone right out of their boring, everyday routine. Second, you lead them astray by mixing up surprise, warmth, and a little ambiguity to lower their defenses. Third, the trap is set. This is where you tap into their repressed desires or maybe even childhood wounds to deepen the emotional reality. And finally, the move is made. This isn't magic. It's a calculated psychological process designed to bypass logical defenses and tap right back into that ancient emotional brain we talked about earlier. Part 6. Achieving True Self-Mastery. And this perfectly brings our narrative arc full circle. Because ultimate influence, it demands absolute mastery of ourselves. Think about it. You cannot possibly lead others if you can't even lead your own mind. And leading your own mind requires avoiding the massive trap of your own ego. I want you to think of Howard Hughes for a second. The guy was brilliant, sure, but his totally unchecked grandiosity led to reckless risks and eventually total isolation. Contrast that with what we call practical grandiosity. It's essentially taking that raw, natural human ambition, that desire for greatness, and tying it firmly to reality. It's breaking your massive dreams down into realistic, attainable goals and actively seeking out feedback so you never lose touch with the real world. To maintain that firm grip on reality, we need purpose. Despite living through brutal wars, insane political chaos, and deep personal tragedy, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius anchored himself every single day with this simple thought: act justly, remain disciplined, and focus on the greater good. This right here is the ultimate antidote to the law of aimlessness. Because without a clear purpose, we're basically just a ship without a rudder, totally prone to emotional chaos. A defined daily purpose protects you from all the external noise, and more importantly, it protects you from your own internal sabotage. So to actually climb the mountain inside you, you cannot keep carrying the dead weight of your old identity. You have to literally set down that heavy backpack full of rocks, All those outdated beliefs, the fears, the unconscious commitments that kept you safe, sure, but kept you totally miserable. So I'll leave you with this. Who will you become when you finally drop the backpack of your past? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Start your micro revolutions today, and I'll see you next time.